You're listening to the Fezcast, produced on behalf of the Saracen Supporters Association and featuring the independent thoughts, rants and rambles of Saracens fans and special guests. If you'd like your opinion to be heard on the show, you can find the Fezcast on Facebook or Fezcast_SSA on Instagram and whatever Twitter is known as these days. But for now, enjoy this week's show.
You're listening to the Fezcast.
Well, hello everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Fezcast. And joining me, it's basically to give two sides of the curate's egg of the weekend, really, of performances. Matt, who was freezing his taters off at StoneX, and Jo, who was freezing herself off her fingers and digits. I mean, kept taking photographs, no doubt, at the Quins game. So a good result and a bad result. First of all, how are you? You doing all right, Jo?
Yes. I'm glad you said fingers. Yes, it was nippy. I was in the crowd, in the stand, which was a really good turnout actually. But we'll cover that a bit later. But nicely thought out now, and just enjoying the warm for today, and see what the next couple of weeks brings.
Yeah, nothing controversial to discuss there, Jo. Of course, no, nothing at all. Matt, I said you were at StoneX for what was a pretty insipid performance, really.
It was, yeah. It was one of those. We do tend to have some of those in December, and I always know when I buy my season ticket, you just got to accept that there's going to be some games where you feel like it was a little bit of a not a waste of your day, because I still enjoyed the day with a few people. But yeah, same as Jo, just about thawed out, and it wasn't a particularly warming performance. But we'll get onto that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, obviously, the first thing we need to discuss is the big news this week. And, Owen Farrell. I mean, we discussed Owen. Last week's show was entitled Rude, which was in a direct quote from Faz. And then midweek, he announces that he's going to take a step back from international rugby because of the abuse that he's been getting, but not only him, his family, and it's just, I've had enough. We just discussed off air. I've deactivated my Twitter. I'm taking a big step back from social media myself. These people, they thrive off it. I mean, I saw I'm going to say it now because you'll have to press the explicit button on this one, but I saw the shit that Owen was getting, even in a moment when he's made an announcement to say, look, my mental health isn't in the right place. I need to take a step back. And for a man like Owen Farrell, who is so committed and who we've said on so many occasions is, has got the single-minded determination that he could get through that, and yet he can't continue on. And people are seeing that as an opportunity to have another pop at him. People, let's just do bloody better, can we, please?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with it. There's just been so much of it in the media and on social media recently. We were only discussing a few weeks ago Wayne Barnes and his retirement for very similar reasons. You only had to look at some of the players' reactions after the England footballers were playing against Netherlands this week, and poor Mary Earps threw upon her sword and has had a few digs on social media as well. And these people need protecting, because if people just want to spend their whole entire time trolling people, then there's no place in society for that kind of stuff. They're sports people that are playing the games that they love, trying to entertain fans, and we all know that the genuine fans out there would never dream of articulating some of the thoughts and some of the words that have come out on social media and other places over recent weeks. And it's just yeah, just be kind, people, for goodness sake.
I mean, absolutely. I mean, at the end of the day, Owen Farrell or Wayne Barnes or other people who are in the public eye, whether that be in the world of politics or, films, music, whatever it may be, at the end of the day, all they're doing is doing a job that 99% of the country couldn't do. You, me, anybody, we cannot play rugby the same way as Owen Farrell plays rugby. We cannot do this, that, or the other the same as anybody else does. So, these trolls, these are people who are not even fit to lace up a pair of boots, and yet they feel the right. I think there's a difference. I think, and what we do is we criticise. I've got a criticism of Christoph Ridley from the Saracens game that we will pull out, but it's a criticism. It's not me turning around and saying, "Oh, you got that wrong, therefore I'm going to spit on your family the next time I see them," or whatever. Honestly, and the actions of these trolls, Matt, makes it more difficult for us to make those genuine, constructive criticisms as part of our role.
Yeah, this is it. I mean, I think anyone that's sort of expecting nobody within sport to come across any, strong criticism, I think that's never going to happen. At the end of the day, anyone that's in the public eye, you mentioned things like politics, anyone that's in the public eye is going to be held to a higher standard than me. Because they're in. Everyone's a bit more sensitive to what goes on in the media. But like you said, there's a massive difference between criticism, constructive criticism, and abuse. It can be such a grey area because you can offend someone when you don't mean to. But I think the biggest issue here is beyond rugby, it's beyond anything, it's social media itself. I'm a firm believer in order to have a presence on social media, you need to be attributable to your own actions and your own comments. You need to be traced back in what you're saying. And it probably wouldn't stop trolling, and it wouldn't stop anyone saying anything particularly abusive. But it would make people actually think about what they're saying before they say it, because it can be, it can come back to bite them a little bit. But yeah, I mean, going back to Owen, hopefully he's done the right thing for himself. I think we could see over the last few weeks, we've commented on it already without really knowing exactly what's going on in Owen's head, that he has been blowing a little bit hot and cold performance-wise, some brilliant moments and some slightly daft moments. Last weekend I had an issue with just how aggressive he was towards the referee, obviously not knowing what his situation was. Personally, still doesn't make it much better, but it is a bit more understandable maybe how he was feeling. And maybe just taking a little bit of time out, an enforced layoff this weekend with a little niggly injury as well might just help him reset himself a little bit. And I really hope that whatever he decides to do, he's able to just come back and enjoy what he's doing, whether that's playing for Saracens, playing for England, whatever. That's all you can really hope for someone who's given an awful lot to the game. And actually deserves to get something out of it as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I thought it was wonderful yesterday, the way that Saracens fans, and I'm sure a fair amount of Northampton Saints fans as well, Matt, appreciated Owen and stood up and applauded him and let him know. And it's a sign of the man as well that, he was at the ground yesterday. He is club captain. And he did not forget that side of it. And he's, it was hugely brave of him to stand up there and say, look, my mental health's taking a toll here. And my family, I'm going to protect my family. That was hugely brave and courageous. And brave and courageous is a word in sport in particular that is bandied around along with heroic far too much. I always find, when you say that was an heroic tackle, no, it wasn't. It was just a tackle. That's what you're paid a lot of money to do. But in certain cases, it is important and it is right to use that. And I think coming out yesterday in front of the cameras and putting himself out there and showing that, look, I'm taking a break, but I'm still part of this, and I'm not going to hide away. and and promoting that conversation. I think Mark McCall's been very good, and I think a lot of people in the world of rugby, James Haskell's one who's come out, and James Haskell's probably having a little bit of a look at himself and thinking, the Archbishop of Banterbury and all of that sort of stuff. What has he contributed to it? But he's doing the right thing. He's making the right noises. There's a few people who've just reported it, and reporting it isn't enough. You have to condemn the behaviour that you are reporting upon as well. And people like Rugby Pass and everything who are they do their clickbait articles or whatever. They need to do better and they need to self-reflect, I think. But yeah, Owen's just been hugely brave, hasn't he, Joe?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think anyone that takes that stance, whether they're out there in the public eye or whether they're just, as I would put in inverted commas, a normal member of the public, it really takes something to identify that and take that break, whether you're taking a break from work, whether you're taking a break from a passion, whether you're taking a break from whatever it is to help you. You just have to do that sometimes. And Owen will undoubtedly have people around him, his family and friends that he can go and talk to. And that's really important as well. And, we've had mental health week recently. We've had men's mental health this week, in the last month or so. And, I've always been a huge passionate advocate in my own work life as well, of sort of saying, it's good to talk. And I know that guys don't always find that. And it's a really, really brave thing to do. And I would always say, there's always someone to talk to. There's always someone to share a problem with. And people who are in the Fezcast, and people at Saracens will always have an ear. So I think that's a really important message.
Absolutely. And yeah, I reiterate that, Joe, and say if Owen does ever listen to the Fezcast or anybody from the club listens to the Fezcast, please pass on our best wishes to the skipper. And, tell him that we, and by wider world of Saracens fans and true rugby fans, are behind Owen and any other players who find themselves in this situation and needing that help. So we have a break there, and then we'll come back and we'll talking about criticising in the right way. We've got a game against Saints to review, haven't we?
Yeah.
You're listening to the Fezcast.
Hi, Alex Osterbury here, Director of Rugby for Saracens Women. You're listening to the Saracens Fezcast.
This is the Fezcast.
Right, well, back with part 2 of this week's Fezcast, and yeah, I mean, we've gone through the whole let's give everybody support and all of that side of things, but yesterday was not a great performance for Saracens Men against Saints. And I mean, the first thing to say, Matt, is I rang my mum afterwards, and her comment was, you wonder how much the Owen Farrell story of the week affected the team, the squad, the club. It has to have had an effect, hasn't it?
100%, yeah. I don't know what Owen's presence was at the game other than wearing plain clothes and signing a million autographs. To be honest, I didn't really notice him around the pitch, and that was obviously his decision to make. Whether he appeared in the dressing room at all to say anything as captain or not, absolutely no idea. But for all my issue with his slightly more aggressive approach to captaincy than many, as a team, I think we did need a kick up the backside at 80 different points during that game. Maro Itoje was the skipper on the day. A very different type of captain, a very calm, considered character, but not a particularly fiery character. And dare I say it, we need our captain to be somewhere in between the two.
Well, absolutely. I mean, that brings us on to the one moment that we had a bit of an argument about on WhatsApp. And, I mentioned Christoph Ridley, who I think is a very good referee, and I did think he actually refereed the game pretty well. Other than the fact that I do think Courtney Laws, we know where Josh van der Fleer's cloak of invisibility went to, because obviously Courtney managed to pilfer it and use it yesterday, because he got away with quite a few, including an elbow into, I'm not sure whose mush it was, but I think it might be Andy Christie or Juan Martin Gonzalez at a mall, where he's thrown the elbow back straight into the face, and nobody said a word. And we were sat there watching the TV. Well, they're going to go back and have a look at that one, aren't they? But no, it didn't. But yeah, the one incident where we got a penalty and then it was turned over because Billy Vanapola reacted when he couldn't get the ball back quick. Now, there's two things here to say, and I'll let Joe come into this as almost like the mediator on this one, because me and Matt have had the to and fro already. Point one, I do agree with Matt in so much as that Billy, senior player, shouldn't have reacted in that way. Should have just kept on going after the ball. However, my problem was that it wasn't stamped on quick enough. And you see it an awful lot of time. The referee's giving away the penalty, and then if a player's going after the ball and he's having to fight for it and then he throws one, well, I'm sorry, the penalty needs to go 10 metres back, and then have a word with the player and say, look, that's your first one. Okay, we don't like that. You don't take it into your own hands. I'm the referee. I'll get on with it. And, what that meant there by the referee turning around and penalising Billy, yes, he might have gone over the top with it, but penalising him. If I'm a back row player for Northampton Saints, next time we give away a penalty, I'm just hanging on to the ball and waiting for the penalties to be, and I think he got that one slightly wrong. Yes, it's right to admonish Billy, but the penalty still was compounded by the fact that Billy found himself in that position, which he should have done better with. Does that make sense, Joe?
It does. And I have seen a few of the highlights, although that wasn't one of them. But I do agree, and I've obviously been party to the WhatsApp debate, and we'll call it a debate, and we won't get quite in the ring yet with the boxing gloves on, because I'll just call it a draw.
Me too,
I think. I think you can. I do agree, Jez, in some ways with you. I also agree with Matt when he comes back in a second. And I think the referee is always in a difficult position. We've always had this conversation, and there are better referees than others. I thought from the highlights that I saw late yesterday that actually overall he didn't do a bad job, Mr. Ridley, and it was a fair refereeing. I think the important thing that any player and any fan wants to see is consistency, and I think as long as they have some consistency across the game, and that doesn't ruin the game, then actually you're always in for some good entertainment. And I've not really answered that because I'm going to sit quite uncomfortably on a fence here, so that I don't have to split you two up or make a ruling on the boxing match.
Well, that's fair enough, Joe. I mean, what I will say to Matt, and I'm sure Matt will agree with me, in so much as that looking at the performance as a whole, as much as Billy probably went too far, if the other players on the pitch had shown 75% of that aggression in that situation, we would have done an awful lot better, wouldn't we, Matt?
Yeah, it's about the only time we came to life during the game, so yeah, can't deny that. Yeah, there's always this insinuation that we're going to suddenly come to blows, the two of us. It never happens, does it? No, look.
Always verbal blows, that's all
exactly, it is. Exactly. And most of the time I'm just trying to wind Jez up because it's remarkably easy to do. But the issue I have is that you watch any game of rugby, if a penalty is given against a team, they are always trying to keep hold of the ball and just slow things down. It is part and parcel of the game. It happens at pretty much every penalty that has ever been given in rugby. And what also happens anytime someone gives someone a shove in the face is you get penalised for it. It's not a new thing. Every referee's going to do it. There was absolutely no need anyway. It was pointless taking that penalty quickly because there was no one really there to actually help to do it. We were in a good attacking position. That ball could have gone in the corner. I'm not going to say it could have changed the game because Northampton's maul defence was perfect, so we might not get anything out of it anyway. But it's just a little petulant moment when the game was pretty even, but we did need to get back into it. And yeah, there's just absolutely no need for it. It's a massive overreaction. And you see, any time anything like that happens, whoever reacts the worst is the one that gets penalised. And we're going to talk about that for the women's game as well.
I think they are.
But yeah, it's, it didn't have any impact on the game whatsoever, I don't think. But it was just one of those things that got on my nerves a little bit, that we've done ourselves out of one of the rare attacking positions that we actually had during the game. And Billy is a repeat offender for silly little things like that. So, we've got to learn.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, this is the big problem, isn't it? And I mean, we do need to talk about the wider game. And as you mentioned it there, Matt, Saints did a job on us, worked us out. Well done to Phil Dowson, and in particular Lee Radford's in defence, for a bloke who's only just come into rugby union from a long playing and coaching career in rugby league. Lee Radford has sorted out Saints, because, as they were saying on commentary, and Lawrence Delalio was very keen on pointing it out, last year Saints would have lost that game, playing as badly as Saracens were playing, because they had a soft underbelly, and in a close season, Lee Radford has sorted that out. We did mention last week, didn't we? We mentioned about 8 or 9 teams out of 10 that could be in the playoffs. Yeah, that playoff situation is becoming very, very congested, and it will be defences, I think, that will win this league this year. As much as we've developed, and again, the guys on commentary and everything were very keen on talking about how Saracens have lost this tag of being the stick out the jumper players, and have actually, scored more tries than anybody else. At the end of the day, we're letting in more tries than we have ever done, and it has cost us on a couple of occasions now.
Yeah. It was, we didn't deserve anything out of that game. But we can also say that the 2 tries that Northampton scored, both down the same wing, both after a ruck that just seemed to have no one around it, and they could just run straight over the top of it and score down the wing. That's not something that we normally do. That defence was pretty shoddy. I'm not going to sit here and say that anyone in particular was at fault, but it was just pretty bad. But where Northampton managed to gain territory was chucking the ball out wide and going for it. And we just seemed really, really reluctant to do that. Particularly the first half. I nearly fell asleep just watching Alex Good, particularly Alex Good, to be honest, just hoof the ball up in the air. And actually, he himself, a couple of times, actually just turned his back on it. It wasn't even sort of setting himself up for it to be returned to him. He was just sort of kicking it up in the air and turning around and walking backwards again. And you had either Maitland or Parton trying to chase it down, and no one else really looking that bothered. That did change in the second half. Our kick chase suddenly looked a bit more energised, and I think it really was with Ollie Hartley and Alex Lewington both coming on. But yeah, it just looked really sort of half-hearted, the whole thing. And yeah, Northampton's win was built on solid defence, really, really solid defence, shutting us down quickly, and making the most of a couple of opportunities that they got. And yeah, we just weren't at the races at all. And sometimes you just have to hold your hands up and say, yep, is what it is.
Absolutely. I mean, that's the comments I've seen online as well on the fans forum and whatever, is that, everybody's disappointed. And I think there will be nobody more disappointed than the lads who are out on the field. Jamie George summed it up midway through the first half when they went to him on the sideline and they said, what's going wrong? What's happening? He went, we're just too soft. And he came on and we didn't really get any harder, really. I mean, Theo Dunn, I thought, had a reasonable game, threw better in the line out than Jamie did, and made some bursts. Tom Parton, every time he got the ball, he looked dangerous, really, really dangerous, but he just didn't get the ball. And as you say, Hartley and Lewington coming on did up us a bit, but the only other player, Juan Martin Gonzalez, had a good game. I thought, that literally was it, really, wasn't it, Joe?
Yeah, and I thought Mark McCall's summing up of it at the end of the game actually was he was very honest and forthright. He talked about the lack of energy, particularly in the first half. He talked about the physicality being below the standards he would normally expect of the team. So I think he really sort of hit the nail on the head and just sort of said, Northampton were the better team today.
Yeah, and I think.
And they were.
Yeah, they were, absolutely. I mean, I think this is the thing, isn't it? There's obviously an element of we've suddenly gone through 5 games where we're all going, oh, well, we're back, and there's, we're looking pretty unstoppable. We're looking, but the writing was on the wall against Bristol because we did not perform against Bristol at all. I think if Bristol had played like they did against Gloucester in the first half yesterday, particularly with Harry Randall, the way that he played, he was superb. Written himself into an England squad there, I think, yesterday. But yeah, they could easily have done a job on us as well. And, the gap between us and the rest is a lot smaller. And it may well be that some teams are a little bit ahead of us. I mean, that Quins game really did sort of like a bit of smoke and mirrors there. I mean, Quinn's not turning up and us putting points on them. We suddenly thought, oh, yeah, we've got this sorted, haven't we? The interesting thing is, if there's an element of tiredness, if there is an element of lethargy in the camp, which would appear to be there. Now we're looking at the last 2 performances. They've now got a long flight down to South Africa for this weekend's game in Pretoria against the Bulls. Okay, it'd be nice with a bit of sun on their back and everything like that, but I fear for that. And then coming back to a Connacht team that are in real good form, really physical. How well are we going to cope in the next 2 weeks, Matt?
It is a bit of a worry, yeah. But it's not often that we play really badly 2 weeks in a row. Having said that, we did that at the start of the season. Yeah, there's a lot to go on, and it'd be interesting to know actually what the sort of timetable is for Saracens over the next few weeks. As myself and my dad were walking away from yesterday's game, we both sort of said, "Oh, I hope they're on the plane to South Africa tonight. Like, just get down there, get on with it, be in the sun all week, acclimatise to it, and then come straight back and get used to 0 degrees playing against Connacht later on." And it doesn't get any better. We've got a Friday night at Sale after that, just before Christmas to look out for. So it is a tough run, but it's the sort of run that this is where we do see where our season is. I think. I mean, historically, we have got out of bed for Champions Cup games. We've often gone into them looking a bit undercooked, and all of a sudden we've blown the team away. You just don't know. But
this is the interesting thing, isn't it? The one thing that I will bring in here, and we'll do it very, very briefly, because I think otherwise we could have a program entirely about it. But with salary caps and all of this sort of thing, with smaller squads, you're asking players to do an awful lot. And, as much as when we talked about first half, Owen Farrell's mental health, this should be treated as an injury, no different to doing a knee or an ankle or whatever. He needs that time away. There's an awful lot of players there who are playing an awful lot more rugby. And if we are actually caring about players' mental health, we need to also care about their physical health, because that has an impact on their mental health as well. And we're asking them to do an awful lot more than they were 10 seasons ago, Joe.
Yeah, absolutely. Travelling, down into the Southern Hemisphere in itself is a trek in itself. Coming back, not having a break. They've had long summers as well, with World Cups and other bits and pieces. So, yeah, I can completely understand people being rested, people taking some time out, whether it's international or club rugby, and just to get themselves reset. And I think actually they probably get the support of Saracens to do that, because if they're not playing at their best and not feeling at the best individually, then they're not going to perform for the team. So I think it's and that doesn't matter what sport you're playing in. I think that happens across the board, really.
Absolutely. I mean, if only there was a template out there for how you can play your players a certain amount and then look after them and make sure you could have more players. Yeah, that was another conversation I got in on social media, which I shall do a timeout on. Yes, indeed. All right, let's finish that one there, and then we'll come back and have a good chat about a good result and a team at Saracens who truly are flying at the moment.
You're listening to the Fezcast.
You are listening to the Fezcast, which is proudly sponsored by the Saracens Supporters Association, and I'm Alison Davis, one of the SSA committee. For a £10 annual subscription, the SSA provides our members with monthly newsletters, virtual and in-person player events, away match ticket allocations, and we organise pre-match gatherings at away matches. We sponsor men's and women's players, and we support the Saracens Foundation Track Club on behalf of our members. On top of all that, every year we have a seasonal SSA badge, which is exclusive to members. Where else can you get that much value for a tenner? Join now at membermojo.co.uk/SSA, or come and see us on match day in the Oasis at the Stonex.
This is the Fezcast.
So I suppose we've done the ugly and the bad, and now we're going to reverse and do the good, shall we? I mean, it's in our Clint Eastwood show here. The good Saracens women, Joe, they are absolutely motoring at the moment, aren't they?
Yeah, Derby weekend, one of the biggest games of the season, and playing away at Twickenham Stoop is always good value. Really good turnout from the crowd on what was quite a dark and dismal and freezing cold afternoon in West London, but the girls pulled it out with an excellent 31-0 win. So I think across the board, I mean, there's again comments been made. We know that Zoe unfortunately had a one-match ban this week and was therefore unable to play. But what I really do want to make a point of is saying how brilliantly Amelia McDougall slotted into that 10 shirt, because you would never know that she's an 18-year-old playing in that 10 shirt in the Sarri squad, and certainly didn't look out of place yesterday. All over the pitch, offloading the ball, great tackling, no fear from an 18-year-old, and a sublime crossfield kick to land Paige Farry's her opening try in a Saracen shirt. Really well played, very impressed. Clearly she's learning a lot from Zoe. You could have turned round from a distance and said Zoe was on the pitch. I mean, the only thing that she didn't do was kick off the tee. But when you got Sophie de Goody, who can kick them from every side of the pitch and stick them across the bar as well, then why do you need number 10 that can do that as well? So the talent out there was just brilliant. First 20 minutes, Quins were embedded in the Sarries 22, and I think that was probably the cause of their frustration for the rest of the game, and we'll discuss some of the issues that came in afterwards. But the defence from the Sarries girls was just absolutely immense. Probably themselves not lucky to get a yellow card, but they did get a warning and change up their discipline. And actually, after that, getting their warning from the ref, I think that they were bob on, really, really good, really consistent across the team. The forwards were just immense, and backed up by the backs who were just all over the pitch. Yeah, and one thing I will just put in from a Saracen Supporters Association, it's really, really sad to see Karis Phillips get badly injured in the first 5 minutes, just signed for Quins this week. Looked like a really, really nasty injury, and hope that she gets well soon, because not nice to see anyone stretched off the pitch, certainly in the first 5 minutes of a debut, and delayed the game by a good 10-15 minutes as well.
Yeah, well, all our best wishes go out, as it would do to any player from any club injured in, any injury, full stop. One player I think we ought to mention, given her central role in the controversies at the end, but someone, I think you described her, Matt, as a bit scrappy-do, which is a cultural reference that shows your age. Perhaps, oh, Shaggy. But yeah, Sydney Gregson doing her best Nick Tompkins impression when Nick Tompkins wasn't being Nick Tompkins on the weekend, Matt.
Pretty much, yep. Someone that we've discussed a little bit, she had quite a bad injury not too long ago and was out of the side pretty much for an entire year, came back in last season and looked pretty good. And I think, started this year as one of our better players. I was watching on the stream for as long as I possibly could, and unfortunately that meant that I didn't see a huge amount of the rugby because, unfortunately, Caris Phillips, it was a long time getting her off the pitch, so all the best to her. But from what I did see, our front row was dominant. Donna Rose in particular was chucking herself around everywhere. And the other one I noticed as well, Joe mentioned Amelia McDougall, but I think she had a little bit of backup from Sophie Bridger playing in the centres as well, just giving her that little extra option kicking the ball away. And probably bringing a little bit of confidence into the game for her as well. So a great performance all round. But back to Sydney. And the other bit of the game that I did manage to see, which was the last 30 seconds of the game. We talk about overreacting to someone wanting the ball. Sydney is a scrappy player. Wanted the ball off of a Harlequins player right at the end of the game just to get rid of it. Got it, gave her a shove, and I saw it on the stream. Joe was there. I'll let Joe describe what happened next.
I'm struggling to remember the name of the Quins player that had hold of the ball. I know that she's a very young player and it was probably meant in a protective way, but the shove came from the Quins player on Sydney first. Sydney gave a shove back, shoved the Quins player into Emily Robinson, and Emily Robinson decided that she would just come like a bull, head down, straight into Sydney's face. The final whistle had already gone. Subs came flying onto the pitch, left, right, and centre. And you talk about Donna Rose flying around the pitch. I've never seen Donna Rose move quite so fast. Get on the pitch. But I actually think that the referee did an absolutely superb job in sorting that one out, because that could have delved into an absolute ruckus. And he did really well in separating them out, getting everyone back into their respective places, subs off the pitch, nice calm conversation with his lines person, and justifiably a red card, which will probably see that Quins player banned for, I would think, 6 weeks plus.
I think it's worth mentioning as well, I might have this wrong, but I believe it was Rachel Burford from Quins who actually was pretty instrumental as well in just stopping any additional issues. So fair play to the rest of the Quins players.
Yeah, but both Rach Burford and Ellie Kildun definitely were in there, just sort of senior players, and just calmed that down.
It's one of those things that happens in games that players will particularly high attention, it's happened to me on more than one occasion when you've been playing and you've been thumped, and 31-0 at this level is a bit of a thumping, and it only takes someone, and I think I mentioned it before, the one thing I always used to hate was when someone used to turn around and say, oh, well stuck at it, and you just think you patronise and git, and all you want to do is hit them, and then you realise you'd lose the fight as well, so you control it back and you don't do it. The issue there with the Quins player is that she's thought about it, she's gone for it, and in the 2-3 seconds it's taken her to go to 10 metres to throw the head, she hasn't thought, this is a bit daft, and she's carried on, and that's what's going to cause a problem. We'll hark back to the Billy Villapola thing. Yeah, okay, penalised, we've agreed that, he's done wrong, but it was very much in the moment. It was like he hasn't thought, he's just done something and reacted immediately. In a situation where you see a player come from 5 metres back and do that, that's not going to play out very well and shouldn't play out very well, and it should be used now. Shame for the player. because she'll be sat there this morning thinking, "What a dick I've been," And I'm sure she'll have apologised to Sydney after the game, and she would have been told to apologise to Sydney after the game by her coaching team and by her captain, because that's what good captains and good coaching teams do. But an example needs to be set. Exactly the same with Zoe Harrison. You just sit there thinking it's a hair pull the week before, a 1-match ban that sends the message out. Don't do it. You see a lot more long hair in women's rugby, obviously, for the obvious reasons. And the temptation's there. I used to play with long hair, like Sebastian Chabel, and the amount of times it got pulled back, and you do it. Oh, and you just...
later. Let's move on from that one.
But yeah, no, I mean, these situations in the same as with, like we started the show off, we're talking about Owen Farrell. Someone's caught out doing something like this. You need to throw the book at them in a certain extent, but then help them afterwards. Say, look, you're going to get punished for this, but let's sit down and have a talk about it. Let's make sure it doesn't happen again for that player.
And I do think Emily Robinson, the player involved, will have had a strong hard look at herself, and certainly, despite it being such a rivalry between Quins and Sarries, there's a lot of friendships there as well. And after the game, the players were mixing. It was all high fives and hugs and handshakes, including with Sydney and Emily. And a conversation I know was had. She will reflect on that, and I'm sure she regrets her decision, because if she doesn't, then she's got an issue. But I've no doubt when she goes in front of the Citing Commission that she will be offering some serious apologies there, and she'll come back a stronger player. But it's, as you've mentioned there, Jez, it's something for everyone then to just have a think about. Red mist is there and underlying in everybody, and anyone says you haven't got it is a bit of a liar. But it's how they manage that. And I think, as I mentioned at the start when we first start discussing the women's game, I think Quins were very, very frustrated at their lack of ability to break down the Saracens' defence. There had 3 other yellow cards during that game as well, for deliberate knock-ons, not rolling away, repeated infringements. And I think they were just frustrated, and that really came just to a head, if you'll excuse the pun. And use that one title of the podcast, if you like.
Yeah. We should say as well, we did have a quick word with Sydney, didn't we? And her head is fine. You know what Sydney's like at the end of the game. She's usually got a bloody nose or a cut above her head. There was no injury, and I think, although it looked horrific on the TV screen and actually live, you could argue it's more of a glancing blow, because Sydney is quick and she reacted and saw it coming. So Sydney is fine. I think she was very shocked that it came, because it's not the sort of thing that you see in women's rugby, and thankfully you don't see it in rugby an awful lot. But particularly in women's rugby, you don't often see that kind of reaction. The players lost her head, and she will have to serve the repercussions from that. It was a disappointing end to the game, but overall, from the Saracens' perspective, clearly really, really good result. Another bonus point win, sticks them at the top of the table 3 weeks in. Nice little week off next week for the players, where we should have been playing Worcester Warriors, unfortunately, and then a nice couple of games before Christmas away at Leicester Tigers, and then at home against Bristol Bears, which is on TNT for those of you that are interested and not able to come to the game.
Brilliant. Well, look, Joe, Matt, I think, before we lose our heads and start throwing nuts around and everything like that, we'll say, what I will say is the one lesson to learn. I remember playing rugby with a guy called Paul Cross, and he always used to say, don't get mad, get even. And I think that's a reasonable argument to take in account with a lot of things. Don't get mad, get even. And sometimes the best way of getting even is just by going out and performing and playing and proving everybody wrong, which hopefully we can do here on the Fezcast as well. But Matt, Joe, thank you for your time. Thank you everybody for listening in, and we'll be back next week on the whatever day it is next week. And I mean, we're recording this on the Sunday. Dates over Christmas all melded into one. It's what colour Quality Street you're on, I think, is it, by the time next week. I think we'll be on the big purple ones by next week, but there we go. Anyway, all the best, everybody. Thank you for listening in, as we say, and we'll say ta-ra from the Fezcast.
This is the Fezcast.